Okay, we will begin this special council meeting at 6 p.m. First item is adoption of the agenda. And the motion is brought forward by Councillor Maybe, seconded by Councillor Jameson, that the agenda be adopted as circulated. All those in favor of the agenda? All those opposed? It's carried. So the next item is declaration of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof. Does anybody have an interest they'd like to declare? Seeing none, we'll go forward with number 4, which is staff reports, operations report SR-206-23, tender RFT-OPS-2023-025, Leeds Fire Station 2. And the motion is incomplete, but I will put it on the floor for the time being to discuss the options. Moved by Councillor Jameson, seconded by Deputy Mayor Fody, that council directs staff to proceed with option blank as described in operations report SR-193-23. So the motion is on the floor. Who would like to speak to the motion, one way or the other? Go ahead, Councillor Lackey.
I don't mind starting off. It's a shame we have to be here tonight over this. I think the direction should have been given in the first place to council. We talked initially, as I said in the last meeting, with regards to a budget that we seem to be all comfortable with. And then we're quite surprised to see that it had grown substantially. And I guess rather than sit here and bang it to death, I think really the design should have come with the money that was anticipated, not the other way around. If we seem to be comfortable at the 4.2 or whatever it was, that should have been the instruction to the designer, would be to come in within that range, seeing as how we were given some examples. Now, the examples I found were not necessarily, we had 2 cities, we had 1 rural, and I think it was established that that was only to determine cost of construction per square foot. But that as well was inconsistent all the way around. So I think I'd like to go with the option of going to redesign to the funds that we kind of agreed to in the beginning of this process.
Okay, just so that everybody is clear, based on the report that's on tonight's agenda, it's option 1 or option 3 that are here for discussion. So further comments or questions? Go ahead, Councillor Rowe.
I have a number of things that I think through you, your worship, but in support of Councillor Lackey's comments, I feel the same way, that initially we had, before the tender went out and we had engaged Idea Group, we were presented with still a surprisingly high number to us of somewhere around 4.2 with all the bells and whistles. And we wrapped our head around that and felt somewhat comfortable with that plan. And then it goes to tender and it comes back at 6+. We'll call it 6+. From that point forward, there was no opportunity for this council. We weren't presented with anything other than, what do you want to do? There was no, as Councillor Lackey has said, had we been provided with a reasonable assessment called, I believe, a Class A assessment from IDEA, the architects, who there's 30 people on this page I see here, and someone did not raise a hand and say, excuse me, folks, but I think you're underwhelmed with the amount of money. It's going to be much more. Did no one say that to staff? Did no one present that? It certainly didn't get presented to council. So all of that to say, if we were to roll the clock back and we were at that meeting where we had looked at the max 4.2 with all the bells and whistles, if we had rolled that back and someone said, oh, by the way, that is not correct, it's going to be 6+. At that moment, I can assure you, I would have said, we have to go back and redesign this thing. So in my mind, not a darn thing has changed in support of Councillor Lackey, because we did not have an opportunity at that moment. It was taken away from us. I promise you, I've looked at every document. It just went, oh, by the way, it went to RFP because we thought it was going to be within this parameters that we got comfortable with. And suddenly it came back here. And a lot of us aren't comfortable with that. And I could go on to say about the budget. We have tremendous pressures from COVID time in our current budget. And we know that to cover our asset management plan and going forward, it is going to drain our capital reserves completely. They're going into negative territory. So one would think that that's a time to be conscious of what you're spending. The only answer that we can provide to the taxpayer without raising their taxes to 15% this year is to say, well, we're going to assume some debt here and we're going to start with and it's going to be 10 million this year and that's going to go up. So our answer is we're not going to raise your taxes, but we're going to have significant amounts of debt. And it all starts right here tonight with a fire hall. So I just want to reiterate, if we had rolled the clock back and we were sitting in there right now and someone had said it's going to be +6+ to build the building, I would have said, let's revisit it. And so I'm agreeing with Councillor Lackey. Thank you.
Director Holliday, can you speak to the question about the preliminary costing and how that's given, how that number came to us to begin with, and what the difference between that estimate is and what a tender comes back at? So I'm just looking for some clarity on what Councillor Gorell has said about the original number that was put before us before we went down the path, and then where it might have changed or what have you.
Thank you, through your worship. So if we go back to, I believe it was April when we brought the report with the Class C estimate at the time, which is ±20%, we were looking at that 4.3 range at that point. And then if we go forward in time, in July we came with the exterior design, and we were still working with that Class C estimate at the time, because we had to finalize the design for the overall building before they went any further. That was when we went through the roofing conversation, where we had the flat roof and we had to go back and redesign. So their focus at that point was on that roof and trying to get all of that sorted out, with the understanding that we needed to have this tendered in order to have it closed for budget. We couldn't have, estimated numbers leading into budget. We had to have solid numbers so that we knew exactly what we were committing to as we went into 2024. So that really crunched the amount of time, because they were redesigning the roof, which had to redesign all of the trusses and all that type of stuff to accommodate the roof at that time. From a flat roof to a sloped roof, while we were still accumulating the water that came off the roof and putting it into the cistern. So at that point, we went through the process. They gave me the documents and it was on the street within a week after that. That's how fast things turned around after the redesign. I didn't have the drawings until September, and they were out within a week after that. And once the tender was out, then it came to council thereafter.
So would it be fair to say that obviously the change in the roof structure did add increase to the cost?
Yes, as we had anticipated. We knew that it was going to be more expensive. That was a known variable at that point.
Okay. So just for my own clarity, so that obviously increased over the estimate, the Class C estimate that we had originally.
That is correct.
Certainly not $2 million for
No.
a change in roof. However, the estimate was based off of 2022 building costs originally.
That is correct.
Okay. I'm just trying to get in my own head straight. Thank you. Okay. So I just wanted that clarity in my own head. Thank you. So I have Deputy Mayor Fody, and then I've got Councillor Kelman, and then Councillor Lackey again.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, this is a combination of clarifying a statement that Councillor Lackey had made through our operations director. If I understood you correctly, Councillor Lackey, you said you would like to have seen the designer been told to come back within a certain range. It's my understanding that the designer has no input as to the cost, nor would know the cost. That's the reason for RPFs. Is that not correct, Director of Operations?
Thank you, through your worship. The designer gives us their cost estimates based on their best knowledge of similar facilities that have been constructed. Obviously, this market that we're in right now is quite volatile. We don't know what the prices will be in 6 months from now. They could be less, they could be significantly more. It's really a roll of the dice with how costing is of metals and all the other implements that go into, we have sub trades, we have all kinds of different things that go into the construction of a fire hall that need to be considered. And the result is that the cost estimates that were provided to us initially were lower, as the intent with my report was to show that was similar with other municipalities that had put out fire halls as well. They were surprised by the costing that came through when their tenders closed as well. So that was the intent. I know that they were, larger cities, provided an example from Rideau Lakes of a smaller fire hall. But the idea was that the facility that we're constructing is more advanced than what is being constructed in Rideau Lakes, and reflects more with the costing of the other fire halls that were provided as well per square foot.
Deputy Mayor Fody, is that the end of your questions? Okay, I'll go to Councillor Kelman and then Councillor Lackey.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. Obviously, I wasn't part of the initial discussions about the fire hall, so maybe the increase in price, I still found it dramatic, but maybe not as shocking as it did for the rest of my fellow councillors. I did quite a bit of research over the weekend about construction cost projections, because I really took to heart Councillor Gorell's comment last week during our budget discussion about, what if we waited a year or 2 years? And though I don't know that would change my opinion, I did really take that to heart. And as the Director of Operations just said, the projections are all over the place for North America. But there was reference time and again to specific materials that are not anticipated to go down in price over the next couple of years, including wood, plastics, composites, plaster, gypsums, and thermal protection. They're all expected to increase at least through 2025. I don't think that we can wait 2 years for a new fire hall. I also really took to heart Councillor Jameson's comments last week about the condition that fire hall is in. I think the chief, as Councillor Jameson said last week, was being very generous in his estimation. Doors falling is not a good thing. If it fell on a person, that is not a good thing. And I think that we should be building something that is going to last. I look to our vision statement that says that we're to be future-oriented and progressive, our mission that says we focus on sustainability. And this project does all of those things. And for that reason, I will be in favor of option 1.
Okay, and Councillor Lackey, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. And now it's time perhaps for some suggestions moving forward. I'm looking at the design, the new design. The apparatus bay is huge. I asked today for the square footage of the Fire Station 1. I didn't receive that, but I can tell you that this is probably bigger. Now I see we've got 3 places on here that we can go to the bathroom. We have 3 bathrooms just to start. We have, a very large training room where we have a training center 6.5 miles down the road. That was the design of the training center, was that all of our stations would go there to train. I understand there is some in-house by the captains. I don't believe that this is a bit overkill in my eyes, as I said, for a number of reasons. I think there's a lot of places that could be scaled back. Like I said, a quick glance. So I really think that we need to go out there with the budget that we have and get the best building that we can. We've seen, unfortunately, Rideau Lakes did it. for 1.9 million. Now you would think if we doubled, more than doubled that one, that we could have something that suits our needs, not our wants. Maybe our wants can come later, but we're talking today. You want a decision today? And with what we're provided, not a chance for me. Thank you.
Okay. So I have Counselor or Deputy Mayor Fode again. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to our Director of Operations. Again, I'll refer to Councillor Lackey. Did you not tell us at the last meeting that you had gone through to see where you could scale back and it only added up to less than $200,000? Am I correct?
That is correct.
That's what I thought. And yet the scale backs were seemingly significant without compromising the building design.
Thank you. So initially we had already scaled back with the facility.
Right.
We had started out with a 10,000 square foot facility complete with a mezzanine. We had a commercial kitchen included in there. Everything that could be scaled out, that could be added in the future, was removed, with the exception of the mezzanine, of course. But we found that once we did the redesign and we changed the heating system, that we didn't actually require the mezzanine for the mechanical room, which would have taken up half of that space. So there were a lot of adjustments that were made once we did scale down the facility to accommodate the smaller scale. Yeah, so we feel that we have scaled out, with the exception of what was included by the consultant, which amounted to, I believe, $140,000. We've scaled out everything structurally, and the sort of wants rather than the needs that could be scaled out of that facility.
Second question, I guess comment, not a question. Like Councillor Kelman, I reached out this morning by telephone to a large contractor who deals pretty much in steel buildings, but not commercial. He did, I assume that, but he's made that statement before we got very far into the conversation. I told him exactly why I was calling. I said, we're looking for comparatives. So after the conversation, I said, I'm not giving you any information that isn't public. His comments were, if you got 13 bids, he said, you got an accurate bid. He said, there's no way you're going to get 13 bidders bidding on the same information and there isn't accuracy there. He said, if you had 2 or 3 bids, he said, then, and maybe if they were far and few between the numbers, it's a different story. But he said, not on 13. He said, the way he told the story, which was understandable, we could all come up with the same type of answer if we thought enough about it. He said, if you've got 13 bidders, pretty good chance there's only 3 suppliers to all 13 of them, be it steel and concrete, your biggest expenses and partakes in most of this building. He said they may be separated from Coburg to St. Isidore, for instance. One supplier drawing their concrete and steel from Montreal, we'll say, another drawing from Toronto, and the other more local. He said who come in lower geographically wouldn't matter, but he said you're likely looking at 3 major suppliers, not the same, of course, with concrete and steel. He said of those suppliers, he says, don't forget, he said, when these people send in their bid, all those multiple emails back and forth between these bidders, there would be dozens of emails on each one of those bidders between those suppliers, guaranteeing that they're going to back up the bid when and if they get the nod that they've won the contract. And he said, because of that, he said, everybody's sharpening their pencil and making sure that their commitment covers their cost, gives them their profit zone they need. But more importantly, he said, when's this going to be built? Well, I said, honestly, I don't know. Exactly. And he said, do they? He said, when are they going to be paid? I said, when the project's finished. Right. He said, what's the cost of the materials then? He said, these are all factors that, say, the steel and concrete suppliers have to supply to the people who are bidding. Are the suppliers aware, those 3, if we'll use them? He said, are they aware that there's 13 contractors? For the most part, they're aware there's 3 or 4 because that might be the 3 or 4 they're dealing with. He said they see the square footage of steel, square footage of concrete. It isn't rocket science to say, oh, this jurisdiction, this one, they're all bidding on this same building. And he said they don't know where the building is, but he said some of them may to be delivered prices. He said, my point is 13 bidders, you got an accurate number. I said, okay. He said, let me tell you what I do or what I'm dealing with right now. He says, I deal in steel every day, much larger square footage than this for the most part. And he said, I've been given a heads up, exactly what Kelman said. He said, through to 2025 and beyond, brace yourself for significant increases. They're possible. So he says, I do exactly what your 13 do. He said, I bid all the time. He said, this is a game I play from the other side of the table. And it's not a game. He said, I have to keep my employees employed. He said, I want to keep my contracts coming in. I have a reputation to hold as a builder, all those things. And he said, there isn't room in today's world for somebody to gouge, because he said, if you did, your 13th bidder would have been way off the grid to the other 12. It may have been higher, but they'd be way off the grid. The other person I went and saw in person today, who deals only in steel, that was an interesting conversation. He says, I am budgeting for 30% increase in the next 2 years and likely higher after that. And he says, I only deal in steel. He said, I can't help you on your concrete, but he says, you and I are a similar vintage in age. I've known this man all my life. He said, tell me something over the years that has gone up and then come back down where it used to be. He says, not going to happen. He said, groceries are going to ebb and flow a little bit, but overall, what you're paying now is what you're going to pay a year, 2 years from now. He said, groceries are not going to drop down to the prices they were in 2020 or 21. Pardon me? Lumber could be, but I think lumber would be a small amount in this building. But there's the end of my comments. Just to kind of echo what Councillor Kelman had said. We got two contractors right here regionally, and they're both giving the same story. And that doesn't change my mind to the statements I made last week. I can work with a number I know. I cannot work with a number I don't know. Much to Councillor Kelman's comments, Councillor Jameson last week, to put this off further is only going to buy us more trouble and perhaps more serious expense. And I don't want to lose the money we have invested in time, in design, and quite frankly, we have the builders right at our doorstep. Yes, it's expensive. We've had other builds we've done since we've sat at this horseshoe, and some of them more recently have come in slightly under budget. We were okay with that. We're not going to hit a home run every time we walk up to the baseball plate. This is expensive. We'll find a way to pay for it. We're not going to be paying for it likely for at least a year, but we will have to pay for it. I did reach out to our director of finance today and had a good chat there. We don't know there isn't infrastructure money coming down the pipe that we can't scoop up a significant amount to offset this. Contrarily, we don't know there is any either. It's an unknown. But the unknown I don't like is to go back to square one. Thanks.
So just to be clear, you're in favor of option one? Okay. Counselor, maybe go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you. It's been reiterated many times tonight so far that costs have increased. I see it all the time too. See the contractors, and to Councillor Fode's or Deputy Mayor Fode's point, when you're bidding, you're getting bids from all over the place. Typically one contractor likes that electrician or that plumber, and because of our geographic area, some of these bids may be asked by a different contractor from the same independent contractor. So the bids are all going to be fairly close. And I do think they are 3,000 difference from top to bottom, but I do feel that there are some, and having been in this game and actually putting bids in, you do know that there's going to be some fluctuation, and some companies are going to have a little higher margin than others. But that's their way of balancing out the field. I have struggled with this design all along, and most of you know that. I've been very vocal on how things were designed on the roof. And I still feel strongly to that. And cost-wise, has it really increased it a lot? No, maybe a bit, but it still gives us a better product. The exterior of this building is better. There has been $3,000 cut in the initial design change I remember that. But I still feel that this building is a great building. It has everything that is required for the future and present. And I do feel that we still need to go ahead with what we presented in option one to get this project on the ground, get it going, and make our community as safe as we possibly can. So option one.
Counselor Jameson, do you want to make any comments?
Well, thank you, Your Worship. I know I made it clear that I would be supporting moving ahead. It's that there are known knowns and there are known unknowns and there are unknown unknowns. I hate to quote Donald Rumsfeld, not my favorite politician, but the reality is that it is a big number. And like so many things that were kicked down the road, here we are. And we knew we would be the council that would have to move some things forward because others did not. We've just rebuilt the Ivy Lee Wharf, and I'm sorry that I didn't get down for the fancy photo shoot, but I went down, and the last time I was down there, I couldn't believe anybody would walk on that as it was. It had been left for so long. We're in a comparable situation. We know what we have on the table. Certainly, we all know the costs can change, but what I worried is that the safety and security of our residents, that's what a fire hall is for. And the one we have now is just not working. And the one we designed after a lot of careful discussion was about a long-term vision. And I realized the change in the fiscal environment that we're all dealing with in our lives has put a big number on the table. But the draft budget that we were presented with was a very carefully drafted one that really understood how to build in some of these concerns and worries. And yes, we are going to be challenged because we now know what the problems are with our stuff, and we got to fix our stuff. And so this is the time to do it. I believe that if we go back to the drawing board, we will effectively kick this fire hall 7 or 8 years down the road. We're not going to turn around a new design and go through all the machinations we've been really going through for almost 2 years. We're going to be looking at 29, 30. And I don't think that we can afford to wait that long if we're really considering the short-term safety and security of our people, but also the long-term needs of the township. I know that I just want to mention that the other municipality that keeps being mentioned with respect to their fire hall seems to be in a great deal of conflict about a number of different things, including that fire hall. And I understand why. And I think part of it is because it appears not to be adequate for their long-term needs. And this is the point again. Yes, we're going to have to be brave and do something that will be ultimately seen as smart. So I'd like to stay with the known knowns. Thank you. I'm for option one.
Okay. Counselor Lackey?
Just one question. I noticed in the design of our building, everything's in square meters, and our quotes are in square feet. So could you tell me the square footage of this building and the cost per square foot that we are currently dealing with?
Sorry, for the new fire hall?
Correct.
Okay.
8,200 square feet, I think. That's what.
Yeah, I'm just looking for my previous report. I think it was in the analysis.
While the director's looking that up, I actually have a question for the fire chief. Chief, can you speak to the building out in Rideau Lakes? And because I've heard rumblings about that may not meet certain guidelines. Is it NFP? I'm sorry if I'm using the wrong terminology, but when I tried to make some calls about this, I'm sort of getting conflicting answers. So maybe you could be a bit more precise and concise about that.
Through your worship, thank you for your question. Yes, I've also heard lots of rumblings about the fire station. I had a number of conversations with some of the firefighters there and some of the management as well. And they weren't totally happy with how that had all gone. There was some concerns over how they've got some of the rooms laid out. Whereas we have access directly in for the firefighters into the clean room, which goes directly out into the fire hall bays. They don't have quite the same way. They've got to go through certain rooms with their dirty gear they go from a dirty room to a clean room to a dirty room again. So I haven't personally seen I think I saw a preliminary set of plans, but I haven't ever seen the final ones. But yes, NFPA is what you were thinking.
NFPA, thank you. So it would be safe to say that based on the chatter about that particular building is that it doesn't meet those standards.
So, excuse me, your worship. So now we're going to make decisions based on hearsay rather than fact?
My question is in regards to the
Been hearing a lot.
NFPA. I was just trying to fill time while Dave sought, you have the information now? Okay.
Thank you. Based on the cost of the tender, we're looking at $712.77 a square foot.
Thank you. So we are still in the upper range of both of these top Cornwall and Windsor, as far as we're well above Windsor and just below Cornwall per square foot of construction. And one is 20,000 square feet, the other is 14,000 square feet. I'd like to go back to the fact that I think this building is we need a fire station. Let's get this straight. It's way overdue. I was on council when we put forth a lot of money to try and bring it up to a standard of that day, knowing full well it wasn't going to last long. So I'm in entire agreement that we need a fire station. Just don't think we need this one. So as I say, you can talk smack all you want about Rideau Lakes, but even if we double it, we double the amount of money that they did, I'm sure that we could have a fire station that meets our needs.
I'm going to recognize the CAO.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. Dave, do you happen to recall when the other two stations, the Windsor and the Cornwall stations, were built?
Sorry, I grabbed this information off of bids and tenders, the procurement site that we use. So the award date for Cornwall was in May of 23. The award date for Windsor was in October of 2023. And then the award date for Rideau Lakes was in November of 2023.
Just to thank you for that, because it gives us some context as to where changes might have occurred over the year. Go ahead, Councillor.
Once again, in supporting what Councillor Lackey is suggesting, what kind of bothers me here is we've leapt to this assumption through a good plan provided by IDEA company, that apparently we can't build a decent fire hall for under $6 million. Did anyone ever ask, as Councillor Lackey is suggesting, hey, what do you get for 4.5? Why can't we ask that question? What is wrong with that? Looking after the tax base, the tax ratepayers, I don't understand. We've just leapt ahead here because we were presented in a reasonable fashion, shall I say. I'm not quite in favor of how it came down, but report after report, we were schmoozed along at about 4.5 million, and then bang, over 6. So what can be done under 6? Do we make something a little smaller? Those, when it was asked of IDEA, the architect, to reduce some cost, they didn't say, hey, start shrinking something down. It said, I looked at the items. They were smaller items than a rebuild or a redesign. Can a fire hall not be built for $4.5 million? There's my simple question. And why aren't we pursuing that thought? Thank you.
I'm going to recognize the CAO.
Thank you, Worship, through you. So my understanding of building design, and it's rudimentary, is that you come up with your specs that you want and you proceed with the design and you cost it out. It's backwards to say, I've got this much money, designer, what can I get for it? Because they'll design something, but it may not meet what your needs. Unquestionably, we could get a building for $1 million if that's what we want. Is it going to meet the needs that were identified at the start of all this process and meet the needs of the community going forwards? Or is it just something that we can walk away and say, hey, we got a building designed for X number of dollars, job done, without it actually meeting the needs of what's going to happen inside it and what's going to be what it's going to be servicing in the community?
Councillor Lackey.
I just took the $712 per square foot and at $4.5 million, that would give us basically a 6,500 square foot station versus an 8,200 square foot. So if that's, I can't picture that in my mind, but it, to me, 2,000 square feet doesn't seem like a lot.
Well, it was discussed earlier that the original, just to your point, the original was around 10,000 square feet. It was reduced to 8,200. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So, Deputy Mayor, I'll let you go and then I'll make some comments.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. Councillor Lackey made a statement a few minutes ago that he was on council a while back when they threw a large, I think that was the term you used, a large amount of money at the Sealy's Bay Fire Hall, knowing it wouldn't last. I'm sitting on this side of the horseshoe going, really? Would that not have been the moment to build it? Knowing they spent a lot of money on a building that wasn't going to last? You won't see this guy spend a lot of money on a building that won't last. I won't spend 5 cents on it. And to your comment about the money on a square foot gives you a 6,500. It was only a few minutes ago, you took a little shot at the mayor, and I'm just going to say what was said. You're going to base that on hearsay. You're basing this on hypothesis. We have no idea what the square footage will be. If we go back, Councillor Grell's ask is that can we not build a good fire hall for $4,400? And we're going to do that. We would throw everything that's happened so far in the garbage and start all over again. We asked this question of our director of operations last week, and I think the answer was, we'll be 1.5 years to get to where we are tonight. And we've already discussed, Councillor Kelman's made phone calls. I'm sure the rest of us have done the same, done our due diligence. And we're going to have increases that are totally unknown. And thus, to my point, we'll be back here in 2 years discussing a $6.6 million cost, hypothetically, for a building that's 600 square feet. You haven't changed my mind. Nobody has. Thank you.
Your Worship, I'd like to answer that, please.
Sure.
The reason we knew that it wasn't going to last and we did put a large amount of money is because the one around the corner was far worse. So should we have built them all the same time? I don't think that would have been prudent either. So here we are, now we're building this one when it tells us right in our last report from our last meeting that we're going to be building another one in what, 2031, 2032. So should we build that one as well? I mean, we can only do what we can do now with the funds we have available.
Okay. So I've gone around the horseshoe and I've taken information from everyone here. And based on the comments made, I have 2 councillors that are in favor of option 3, and I have 4 that are in favor of option 1. So based on those comments and questions that have been asked and answered, hopefully to people's reasonable expectations, based on that, option 1 would be going in the motion at this point in time, unless I've miscalculated. Okay. So based on that, the motion that is put forward by Councillor Jameson and seconded by Deputy Mayor Fody, that council directs staff to proceed with option 1 as described in Operations Report SR-193-23. Go ahead.
I'll be asking for a recorded vote, please.
One of the things that I'll just say before I call the vote was the difficulty that I think all of us have had trying to weigh the pros and cons of all of this. But I guess I'll actually reserve the comment I'll make until after the vote. And then we'll go from there. So I will call the question. All those in favor, and we'll ask the clerk to take the recorded vote.
Counselor Lackey,
No.
Counselor Kelman,
Yes.
Counselor Grell, Counselor Jameson, Counselor Maybe,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Fody,
Yes.
Mayor Smith-Gaki.
Yes.
5-2, the motion is carried.
So one of the things that I had struggled with, that truthfully was the point as far as when we were discussing budget, was the long range strategy, and it's been brought up here tonight. So on page 67 of the budget binder, the funding strategy. So while we can't forecast everything in the future, the asset management plan has definitely given us a lot more meat to work with and tools. It's not set in stone, which means that based on this funding strategy, we could potentially borrow more if we wanted to. We could borrow less depending on what our tax increase levy, assessment increase might come in at. So depending on, there's a lot of variables. This is our best estimation. And at this point in time, the funding strategy shows 16% borrowed funds out of a $16 million spend from 2024 to 2033. So in the end, that was where my comfort came from, is that at this point, it's a reasonable amount of debt for this municipality to take on, based on the funding model that has been put forward by our treasurer. And this is my opinion. And that we will be faced with much more difficult decisions as things go on. But now that this decision is made, that is taking out the unknown. So I thank all councillors for their input this evening and and suggestions based on options. And we still have one more item, which is bylaws. So that's number 5. And the motion is from Councillor Grell, seconded by Councillor Kelman, that 3 readings and final passage be granted to bylaws. And that 3 readings and final passage be granted to bylaw number 23-081, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Corporation of the Township of Leeds and the Thousand Islands at its December 18th special council meeting. So this is confirming the bylaw 23-8080, the 2023 emergency management program, which was the error in the last meeting. So, and plus the confirmatory bylaw. Oh, sorry. The clerk just let me know that she will note the error in the minutes, so that we don't have any confusion going forward. The minutes are extremely important. Obviously, when we go back to look, she will ensure that they are corrected. So that motion is on the floor. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? And that is carried. And the next item is adjournment, moved by Councillor Kelman, seconded by Councillor Grell, that council adjourn. All those in favor? All those opposed? We are carried. Thank you, everybody.